back. We got John Turmel joining us, and guys, I don't know about you, but I've known about John Turmel for probably decades because I guess, John, you're a bit of a pioneer in the whole alternative currency system. I mean, you just told me a story that I wasn't aware of about the Let's.
Yeah, well, that didn't get me notorious. It was running in elections. Okay. Now, I've always worn this white hard hat.
Yeah, I know. I remember that hat.
John the engineer.
Yeah.
Just so that if they want to laugh, they know they're laughing at a guy with a science degree who's trying to help them. Now, I first ran for Parliament in 1979 because I used to run a gambling casino underground. I was the teaching assistant of Canada's only mathematics and gambling course after my engineering degree. So I have the same education as Mr. Spock on Star Trek, the guy who could figure out the winningest way to go. I can too. So I got tired of being busted. So I running underground games. I wanted to play blackjack. I was one of the world's first card counters. I beat Vegas until they barred me. Then I wanted to run blackjack in Canada until they busted me. And then, so I got tired of being busted and I ran for Parliament. And somebody asked me about inflation. And I said, hey, how come my casino chips don't lose their value and the government of Canada's chips lose their value? What's going on? It's the same hardware.
Yeah.
Therefore, inflation must be a software problem with how the chips go in and out.
Okay.
So I did an engineering analysis and I figured out that interest causes inflation. Quickly, here's how it works. 10 guys put up their watch as collateral. They go to the liquidity deliverer. They all borrow 10 gallons of water, dump it in the pool. But now they got to come back with 11 gallons of water.
Right.
At the end of the game, 9 guys come out with 11, get their watches back, but the 10th guy ain't got any water left in the pool and loses his watch. So that the liquidity had one less watch backing it up.
It's like musical chair.
Exactly. I've used that example so many times. Yeah. It is an elimination game.
Yeah.
So mortgage means death gamble in French. Mort.
Oh yeah, right.
Gage.
Right.
Death gamble. So when you promise to bring back more than they printed, they're going to end up with one guy's house.
Yeah.
And that's how inflation happens. So they'll raise the interest rate, more houses get seized, more inflation you're going to suffer. Yet the big lie of economics is that interest fights inflation. Okay, go look out there. Everybody will always repeat umpteen times. It's the meme, interest fights inflation. Oh, there's inflation, must get interest to fight it. Everybody believes that raising production costs will be passed along in lower prices. Can you imagine anything more stupid?
Well, John, okay. So I just want to say this because I think economics is a bit of an art form. They call it the dismal science. But I think it is a bit of an art form. And I just want to say this because I was surprised. First of all, after the Second World War, we had Keynes come in and he talked about, everything the FDR did with the New Deal. That was all Keynesian pump. And it worked. It actually worked. And then in 1980, when Reagan and, Margaret Thatcher came along, they said, okay, we got to tackle this inflation that was plaguing the West in the 70s. And I didn't believe it, but they said, okay, we're going to fight inflation with interest rates. And that's what they did. And they knocked the stuffing out of the economy in 1982, 3, whatever that was.
Yeah. I was picketing the Bank of Canada every Thursday, okay, when they set the rate.
Well, listen, I tell you, I thought, it was really, I remember so many people lost their houses in those days.
It's in my poem.
And businesses couldn't, it really knocked the stuffing out of the economy, but it beat the economy up so much that it did kind of tackle inflation.
Well, only because there's nobody left to charge anything. Okay, everyone's busted. How are you going to, raise your prices when you can't sell anyway because nobody's got the money?
I know, but what I'm saying now is that because now they're trying to tackle inflation again, and all these economists who aren't artists because the strategy you need to tackle the economic problems, I think, needs to evolve. So Keynes was right after the Second World War.
Except he allowed interest rates.
Well,
yes, we
there
needed
should
more
be no
money.
interest at all.
That's right. Yes, we needed
Yeah.
more money, but if you allow interest, well, you're going to generate inflation, which is what came
I
about.
don't disagree with that.
Yeah.
I was just surprised that it actually worked, but it came at a tremendous cost. That's when the homeless problem began.
Yeah.
Was when they killed inflation with interest rates.
That's when I was picketing the Bank of Canada.
So now you got these economists that grew up in a world where we have one tool to manage inflation, and that's interest rates.
Yeah.
And now they're doing it, and I don't know if it's deliberate or not, but if they try to tackle inflation with interest rates now, they're going to steal all the wealth from the people of the country.
Yeah, but it's completely wrong. It's idiotic.
Of course.
How does this inflate and this not? I can make this poker chip inflate by charging interest.
Right.
And I can stop it from inflating by not charging interest, which means that you can stop money from inflating by not charging interest. A service charge to pay the banker's time, but not interest to pay for money's time.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
So in a you got to pay your monthly fee to pay the banker to do the accounting, but then there's no interest. So a service charge doesn't have the same death gamble effect as interest does.
Yeah.
Now, would you like me to do my poem on money? It'll be,
guys, should you want to hear a poem?
put it this way.
That's where the money is.
Nothing clears it up better than a poem on money. Okay. Okay. All right. So here it is. Oh, Canada's debt national had much stabilities till 1974 starts exponentiality. So here's the graph of Canada's national debt, and it was about 20 billion throughout all of history till 1974.
Yep.
Something happened in 1974 to start it growing.
Yep.
Now, same in Ontario, 1974. Same in Quebec, 1974.
Yep.
Debt's doubling over time. Did debts all start to grow in big coincidence? Sublime. So, the Bank of Canada once loaned to provinces and Fed without the interest that causes budgets to turn red. Did you know that?
Oh, yeah. I was there when Rocco lost the case.
Okay, he might have mentioned it. It financed major projects, made St. Lawrence Seaway B. Trans-Canada was highway funded, sea to shining sea. Bank of Canada, interest-free loans. But not only infrastructure, also paid for World War II. With interest-free cash, we almost nothing couldn't do. The only question then was how the tax should be assessed for goods and services, a simple formula to test. Now, King Henry I did this with tallies, wooden tallies. Right. He took a stick of wood, printed 10 pounds of gold, split it in two. One half was the tally, one half was the stub. So for services, they levied tax at end of every year. For assets, tax to pay depreciation. Very clear. With taxes only for depreciation and repair, so easily affordable without the banker's share. But in 1974, Pierre Trudeau cut the feed, ruled no more interest-free loans for infrastructure need. All governments must borrow now new funds from private banks and raise new tax to service interest with bankers' thanks. That's what happened in 1974. Pierre Trudeau shut the interest-free loans at the Bank of Canada, and the governments all had to go borrow at interest and tax us to pay them interest, which is why I'm angry. Okay, we're told that government finance is only for the sage, too hard for Mr. Average at study to engage. But does it have to be well understood by only few? Or can the problem be explained for Mr. Average too? When you were little, did you ever dream of printing cash, filling up your wallet with some money in a flash? Creating money accurately means, to have the plates. Where's my money? I need a $20 bill here. To have the plates, the printing, the stamping, okay? The creating money accurately means to have the plates, the stamping of some paper into notes best demonstrates. Or stamping metal into coins. Or blips computerized into your bank account deposits. Checks now authorized. So whether metal volts of electricity, paper metal volts of electricity, to have the plates is printing money. Absolutely free. Now, if you printed it to spend, the others would bewail. They'd call it counterfeiting and they'd send you off to jail. But what if government would let you print it up to lend with only what you can collect in interest to spend? If you could print and lend 1,000 out at 10%, you'd make 100 interest on printing that you lent. But if you could print up and lend $1 million out, you'd get an extra $100,000 for your fee on debt. If government stops using its own plates and comes to you, $1 billion printed nets $100 million revenue, with everybody being taxed to pay you interest. Of all the scams in history, to have the plates is best. Though never lending, though never spending, only lending, riches do await to all who with the plates become loan sharks to the state. And though to join the few who thus they profit, one might dream, wake up to see we're all the victims of this greedy scheme. Though governments of old rude Bank of Canada run plates without the interest to middlemen at rip-off rates, most governments today to banking industry have lost control of money plates. So interest is now a cost. I'll pay my tax for army and police to handle strife. I'll pay my tax for doctors, nurses who protect my life. I'll pay my tax for all engaged repairing road and sewer. I'll pay my tax for social servants helping out the poor. I'll even pay my tax for bureaucrats with no regret. I only object to paying tax for interest on debt. I'll gladly pay my tax for people's time at useful toil, but taxing me for money's time will always make me boil. We now know the unjustly cost that makes our tax inflate, and only interest is what we must eliminate. The best solution is to get the plates back from the banks, have Bank of Canada controlled for service charge and thanks. But worse, in 1968, Pierre Trudeau lifted cap on interest from 6% to 60%, setting trap. In 12 years, central bank rate rose to 22%. More tax to service greater debt at higher rate was spent. Percent of 30 was the rate of chartered banks we saw. Percent of 40 rate by private bankers under law in Canada. Okay, 1 million families evicted. Mortgage could not meet. With Pierre's high rate death gambles putting foreclosed on the streets. The reason foisted on them for suffering such high rates was interest will fight inflation, economic state. What fool believes that raising costs can lower prices high, yet fell for it they did, the biggest economic lie. Pierre Trudeau is responsible for debts out of control, for lifting rate cap, ending infrastructure loans, his role. Our taxes disappear since over 40 years ago. For interest on Trudeau's debt, we didn't have to owe. If we got back $2 trillion taxed since Pierre helps banks us fleece, reversing algorithm gets back 60 grand apiece. Okay? $2 trillion is the total taxation that was taxed over 40 years. And if we got it back, we'd all end up with 60 G's. Okay? Oh, Canada sure could have offered all a living swell, but Pierre in 1974 turned heaven into hell. While Justin could make loans again without the usury, could we expect but more bad fruit from father's crooked tree? An engineering dropout, prostitute does what he's told, a follower, a beta boy, no alpha leader bold. If Mr. Spock could at Computer Central all alone upgrade bad code to save a planet from the danger zone, no help he needed from the low-tech slows with no clue, what Spock can do, the engineer says, I can do it too. If you had sugar daddy friend to lend you all you need, till you're back on your feet, would that to stress reduction lead? With rest of life to pay him back, no rush as it can get, would you repay or stiff your friendly sugar daddy debt? Last two paragraphs, quatrains, here we go. If you had, okay, so a Spock upgrade for online Bank of Canada account, a sugar daddy credit card, no growth of due amount. When all your payments go against the principle of debt, you're someday out of debt, and that's as good as dead can get. So that is how Pierre Trudeau started our national debt growing by shutting the interest-free loans from the Bank of Canada.
Amazing.
And all we have to do is give everybody an interest-free Bank of Canada credit card, the Spock solution, and everything is fixed by itself. We don't need to do anything else. But it may be, if you don't now, that's when the SLETS program comes in. Back in 1984, I sent Joe Clark when he got elected and beat Trudeau the first time. They were in debt. They didn't know what to do. So I sent them a letter. I said, I tell you what, I'll lend you $100 billion worth of my casino chips for you to spend, as long as you only spend it on work, people that toil. Okay. So that way they will retain their confidence in my chips that they now have. But he didn't listen. So I kept running in election after election after election, offering to reprogram the Bank of Canada's computer to give everybody interest-free credit cards. I'm now at 106 elections. I just finished the last municipal in Brantford. 106. I got in the Guinness Book of Records at number 41. And the guy who was number 2 at 39, he died. So I'm never going to lose that record. So I can't stop running for the power to reprogram the bank's computers until it's done. And people keep saying, don't you get a message that they don't want it? I'm saying they don't even know, because the media keeps shutting me out of the debates. Back in the early 80s, the rules were that you had to have an equitable share of the free broadcast time, quantitatively or qualitatively. So when I started being excluded from debates, I complained to the CRTC, and when they did nothing, I dragged them into federal court. And I said, hey, I'm supposed to get a fair share of this free time that they're giving away on our public airwaves. And every judge said, no, sorry, zero looks fair to me. Now, I was just in federal court, and I'm on a reserved decision before Justice Fothergill. The Crown made a motion to ban me from being able to help people in court and to get permission before I can file, because I keep relitigating stuff. Well, I told you, Judge, look at when the first judge said, no, I think zero is fair. What do you think I'm going to do? Stop or look for a judge with the brains to know that zero ain't fair? I said, I kept going back looking for a judge to say, okay, zero's not fair. Give him his time. And I never found one.
John, I hope they didn't call you a vexatious litigant.
Yeah, that's the key.
Ooh.
That is the actual case. The judge is going to decide to declare me a vexatious litigant so that I can't. Now, I did more than that. Back in the 1980s, I put up templates to help people stall their foreclosures.
Okay.
Because mortgage was a violation of biblical and criminal law. Because if it's a fee for the privilege of participating in a gamble, I'm a professional gambler. I've been busted umpteen times, and I know the gaming house laws. So I charged them with gaming house, and they said no. So I put up templates which allowed people to stall their foreclosures. Back in the early 80s, I think it was the Woodhouse family whose kid had been killed in a railroad accident on the tracks, and they were being evicted, and I stalled their foreclosure 33 months, rent-free.
John, I got to ask you this. Okay, because, and this goes back to the poem.
Yeah.
Right. As well. And that is that because these banks, when you go borrow money for a mortgage, they don't actually give you money that they already have in the bank.
No.
They just make that money up.
Brand new chips.
And they give it to you.
Just like a casino.
Yeah. And then, but if you don't make your payments, which, by the way, over a 20 or 30-year mortgage is probably 5 or 6 or more times
don't forget,
more than what the house is worth.
They'll have taken most of your money back in interest payments.
Yeah, that's
living in nothing to pay the principal.
Well, not only that, that's what I'm saying is that in the end, you pay 5 times what the actual price of the house is. You end up paying 5 times that. And that's all the interest.
If you're a winner,
right.
If you manage to pay back more than the principal you got,
if the music doesn't stop,
that's why you got to get somebody else's principal to pay your interest.
Right. Okay. So here's my point, because I heard about some cases where the bank was trying to seize the house because of lack of payment, and the owners of the house were making the case that, well, bank, you have no right to grab my house because it's not even your money.
You didn't part with anything of value.
Exactly.
That's right.
So does that case hold any water?
Well, put it this way. It makes sense that if they just printed up new chips like a casino, and the casino is charging you interest until you got no more money to pay your debt, should you be forced to continue paying the debt when they took all your money back in interest? That's the reason that you shouldn't have to pay, because they took the principal back in interest. But if they weren't taking interest, then you should pay it back. Then if you can't pay, you should give up the asset to someone else who's going to pay it. But if they're going to take your principal and in interest payments so that you cannot pay, it becomes a death gamble. You have to get somebody else's money to pay your debts. Then now that's a good reason to say no. And that is their Stiff the Bank kits that I offered, the templates in the 1980s. Maybe 50 different families use them. I went to the Supreme Court of Canada 6 times on a Stiff the Bank issue, okay?
Right.
They didn't print the interest. I ain't paying it. I'll restore the interest because that's what Jesus said to do in his parable of the talents. Remember the servant who buried the gold?
Right.
Okay. Well, then he came back and said, I knew you charged interest and I'm not going to pay you. So here's your principal back. And the master said, you know, I take interest. And then he defined interest. To those who have abundance, positive will more be given. And from those who don't, they take it away. So I'm throwing you out into the alley where men weep and gnash their teeth. Well, the parable started with the kingdom of heaven is like, where the master's a loan shark and there's alleys where people gnash their teeth. Does that sound like heaven to you? So the parable was a trick by Jesus to say the kingdom of heaven is just like the kingdom of hell, except kingdom of heaven doesn't have interest.
Really?
So he said that, yeah, and that's why I had judges say to me, hey, the parable says the master's charging interest and the master's Jesus. I'm saying, no, he's not. Okay. The master is not Jesus. It's a master. It's a loan shark. But just because Jesus said the kingdom of heaven is like, then he describes the kingdom of hell with the differential equation for usury. Now, that statement I gave you, to he who has abundance will more be given. From him who has no abundance, who's short, even what he has will be taken away. That's the most repeated piece of scripture in all of the Bible. 7 times that statement of Jesus is repeated, and nobody knows what it means. It's how interest works. They said to Jesus, why do you speak in parables so they don't understand? He said, because in this world, to those who have abundance will more be given, and from those they don't, they take it away. That's why I speak in interest, so in parables, so you'll understand the secret of the kingdom of heaven. Get rid of interest, but they're not going to get it. So I'm writing I got a whole poem on Jesus' differential equations, and I'm finishing a book now on Jesus' his equations for the kingdom of heaven like hell. It's the light that throws everybody off. They think the master loan shark is Jesus. It's not. But he's saying that heaven is just, if you look at your world, food, clothes, housing, accommodations, entertainment, medical care, all sorts of, it's heaven, except for your debts.
I think so.
Except for the debts that are causing you headaches. So the kingdom of heaven is just like the kingdom of hell without all the debts, without all the usury. Now, I have no problem with paying back the principal they gave me, okay? Because that's fair. As a matter of fact, that's the offer, the parable of the talents. Okay? That's how Jesus said to fight your banker. Offer him the principal, stiff him for the interest.
Okay, John, that's fantastic. But this guy, do you know this guy, Cal Washington?
No.
I'm just going to say this because what he says is, he takes there's a line in Revelation. I think it's Revelation 18. You take the cup that they give you, you fill it up double, and you hand it back to them.
Fill it up double?
Double. Know what I'm saying? Okay, John, wait, okay, we got half an hour left.
Want to get to COVID now?
Well, let's do a little commercial break and we come back. Okay. I just want to say, because you mentioned the whole Spock thing, I just want to say a lot of Canadians are already working on that, and it's evidenced by the $5 bill. Have you ever seen one of these, John? The
I like that.
Neat. Don't forget it. That's why I took out the site smartestmanonearth.ca and smartestman.ca, because I got the same education as Mr. Spock, and I got a list of things where I got it right and the world got it wrong, including inflation.
Do you have to go back to your home planet every 7 years?
No.
I want to.
This is mine.
Yeah.
I said I'm the closest thing, not.
Yeah.
All right. Okay. We're going to take a quick break. We're going to come back with John. We're going to get into some COVID stuff, but we're going to get to the solutions as well before 2 o'clock. So, folks, it's your lucky day. Okay. We'll be right back after this.
Just hear it like last night, and by the next morning, then just come here and just sit down everything.
She's talking about the demolition of houses in the Bernard Lodge area near Clifton in St. Catherine. The demolition started on Thursday, October 6th.
Up first this evening, there was high drama in a section of Bernard Lodge, St. Catherine today as demolition crews began the removal of illegal structures in the area.
Prime Minister Andrew Holness had announced the demolition in Parliament.
Is this all? Can we attribute any of this for the lack of respect that Ed Martin and Aaron McNago saying that it's really happening to our leadership and to our country now?
Well, I think you have to attribute it to that, Armstrong. I really don't think there's any other way to look at it other than leaders around the world don't respect the president. They don't believe that he will pull the trigger.
Let's consciously as a nation, have conversation about what that means and how we make that change. We're talking about legacies embedded in our educational institutions and other institutions, the statutes, the names of streets and places, all of that. That we have artifacts that are sitting in London.
Oh, what a drop kick Thunderbolt just put on it. Hamilton had to take on the both of them briefly there, and he did all right. The Mod Squad finding out that they're going against the competition here at Thunderbolt Hamilton.
I like that I'm able to be here without supervision or an adult and be a full-fledged volunteer. I'm allowed to be here without supervision because through the Junior Pals program, you go through training so you're able to be an alone volunteer.
The thing you should know about the Junior Pals program is that it's good when the kids are interacting with the animals and they get socialized.
You were watching Carrot Vision.
All right, we're back here. Okay, listen, a little bit. And Lamont, I know we're doing a lot of talking over here. If you want to talk in, just, say it.
You know what? Let's just say this. I know one thing about intellect and wisdom is that when somebody like John is talking, the man's brilliant. I like to shut up because you know what? It's always tough to have the fool say no words until he's opened his mouth and proved himself right or wrong. See, I don't even know how the quote goes. But no, John, you've got some amazing history, my friend, and you need to be a part of this next equation that the people of Canada need to see for the next level, because you're absolutely correct. These systems have been in place. Pierre Trudeau has destroyed the country when it comes to when the provinces had to start paying everything back. And it's destroyed the country. Yeah, with interest. Yeah. And you're right. And bringing it to the parables of the talents is an amazing way of having people see how the Bible is really a roadmap of the future. Because this has all been put in there for the people that were smart enough to look for the answers. People aren't asking questions anymore.
Hey,
right?
and just don't forget the new king just swore his thing on the Bible. That's the contract.
Boy.
I just want to say tomorrow we're going to be keeping this conversation going with Cal Washington, and who's got some real solutions here. But we're all got solutions here. And John, I know you got another poem about the whole COVID thing, right? Do you want to start?
Okay, I want to mention though that if you go to smartestman.ca/poem Bible without the E, it's got 500 verses out of the Bible to do with interest rates. It's got the parable of the talents, everything in there. It's all poetic.
What's that website again?
Smartestman.ca. How dare I? Anyway, okay, here's my COVID poem. Now, what happened was when COVID started, the WHO announced that the COVID 3.4% death rate was way, way more than the flu's 0.1% death rate. Right. Then Gateway Pundit, a great outlet, said, hey, they did a research. They're not comparing apples to apples. And I went and checked, and it was right. The COVID 3.4% death rate was hospitalized death rate. And the flu's death rate was the overall group death rate, not in hospital too, off by a factor of 100. That's what this poem is about. So when Fauci said corona death rate 30 times the flu, would you have hit panic button sounding the alarm bell too? Had Fauci told the truth, it's only third as bad, would you have hit panic button sounding the alarm so sad? So the COVID Here's how it works. Flu, 1 in 1,000 who get it will die, but only 1 in 100 go to hospital, where 10% of them die.
Right.
So the infection fatality rate is 0.1%, 1 in 1,000, but the case fatality rate in hospital is 10%. So when I heard COVID was 3.4%, a third of the flu, I said, what's to worry about? So can't blame the chief executives for sounding the alarm. It's not their job to check if expert models do more harm, but a chief engineer must check the model blueprint out to find out Fauci fudged the metrics. False alarm to shout. The case fatality rate, CFR, who die of flu, is 10% in hospitals. A tenth don't make it through. While IFR, infection rate fatality of all, is 1/10 of 1%. 0.1, 1,000th, very small. When WHO said COVID CFR was 3.4%, 1/3 of 10% of flu, good news was heaven sent. But Fauci apple oranged 3.4 to flu's 0.1. Fear factor amplified 100-fold when scam begun. So he didn't compare it to the 10%. He compared it to something 100 times too small, exaggerating the threat by a factor of 100, which is why my book is called COVID Mortality Hyped 100-Fold. Exactly 100-fold. The statistics are beautiful for flu.
Oh, wait, John, we don't have to worry about any of that stuff. We just go get vaccinated. Everything's going to be fine.
We'll find out now. Don't forget. So now the Gateway Pundit, apples not to apples, first complained. I checked and found an apple to an orange was the stain. How will a world of scientists admit to being fooled by ruse most elementary? We thought them very schooled. Not one doctor on the planet said, hey, CFR, IFR are comparing different things. Not one doctor noticed and spoke up, or they were all too scared. Okay, but not being a doctor, being a professional gambler, they couldn't fire me. I could speak up.
This is true.
So March 24th, the CDC changed cause of death to do. So death with COVID, not from COVID, is the guideline new. Subtracting murders, suicides, and accidents from count shows only 6% of stated deaths is true amount. The CDC site has 6% died of COVID alone, and the other 94% died of comorbidities. Okay, suicide, bullet to the head, lightning strike, kid with brain cancer in Alberta. They all put down COVID, and it was all false. Because of the new guideline they changed in March 2020. The CDC said half transmitters had no symptoms seen. Not knowing who's a threat, the answer is to quarantine. Social distance remedied the never knowing who would be infectious, even though there would be very few. On April 2, who said that after long time searching spent, asymptomatic is transmission we can't document. They couldn't document anybody without symptoms spreading it, okay? And yet who CDC said half the people got it from people without symptoms. So
No
10 million tested in Wuhan proved CDC was wrong, found zero symptoms transmitters passing it along. Don't forget, if you could pass it along and you didn't show symptoms, there would be clusters amongst your family and friends.
Not only that, but some of those people who you infected might not get any symptoms either.
Okay, but even then, there would be clusters
true, yeah.
around people who had no symptoms, and no clusters were found out of 10 million people.
Well,
wow.
That's why we.
So, June 8th, who said again, it won't transmit without a sneeze. Like flu, no symptoms is no danger. Coping's now a breeze. It's easier into a scam, the simpletons to coax, than to convince them that they have been taken by a hoax. It feels like we escaped the plague that came so very near. A panic justifiable, now hard to break the fear. Admit it's not so bad to end imaginary hell. We must shake hands and hug again to break demonic spell. Unless you're sneezing, duh. We may now this is at my site smartestman.ca/flyer, c19flyer.ht.pdf. We made a big mistake, said Dr. Bridle in alarm. You heard of him?
Oh, yeah.
All right. We didn't know the spike could travel heart and brain to harm. When spike attaches in an artery, we find the flow impaired enough to have the blood clots start around to grow. Clots start in capillaries, so you'll not yet feel the threat. As pumping blood gets harder, watch as bigger clots you'll get. Would you have taken clot shot if Judge Allen had us told? This is Judge Allen she wouldn't let me take my case and threw it out. If she had told virus mortality was overhyped 100-fold, okay, she knew that it was a false alarm and they'd hyped it 100-fold, and she wouldn't let me take it to court. When then 32 million Canadians then took the shot. And that means that 1 in 1,000 are going to get myocarditis and die. All right. So that's 32,000 going to die because of her.
See, they should come up with a vaccine for myocarditis.
Oh, yeah. With capillaries clogged from spikes, it may be said, if you and kids took jab, your clots now make you walking dead. Yeah. Though Trudeau said his shots were safe, effective, not to fear. He'll even pay your funeral expenses. What a dear. So that is the story of how they tricked us into lockdowns so we would take the shot to get out. And now we find out the shot not only isn't effective, it has negative efficacy. It causes you to get COVID more readily. As a matter of fact, you can prove that by saying that 85% of Canadians got the shot, but 92% of the deaths from COVID were from vaccinated people. You would expect it to be 85 if 85% were vaccinated, not 92. So therefore, you got more people dying who got the shot because they got the shot. And there's the proof, simple statistics. Now, I'm not only that, but I was declared an expert witness in math in the Federal Tax Court of Canada. And she threw out my case and said, there are no facts there. Who comparing apple to orange? That's not a fact. Wuhan finding no transmission? That's not a fact. CTV announcing on November 15th that 10,850 people died in long-term care and only 166 not. And they were probably fat and diabetic. So almost no healthy people died of COVID, and they took it down off CTV. Then they changed the guidelines. Then they used the PCR tests that were set too high. And then Bill Gates, they had to discredit HCQ. The guy Didier Raoult in France.
Wait, what's HCQ?
Hydroxychloroquine.
Okay.
The guy in France saved 99.2% of his patients out of 4,000 patients. That's a big sample. Only lost 0.8%. So how did they deter people from using HCQ? Lancet and the New England Journal of Medicine published bogus surveys saying that it was dangerous. And Bill Gates said our survey in the UK Oxford test had 25% people die by overdosing them by a factor of 10. Okay, so they discredited HCQ and now ivermectin, which I hear binds with the spikes and maybe the only way to save the vaxxed. Okay, but you can't get ivermectin. They've banned it. You can, but still, it seems maybe HCQ too. But ivermectin, I've heard binds with the spikes if you've been vaxxed, and I know of no other way you may be saved. Okay, yeah. So that's another piece of information. So the people who now did it to us, locked us down, and forced them to take the vax, they're now saying we want to have amnesty. Did you read about that yesterday?
I saw that article in the Atlantic.
That's right. Those people who forced us, we didn't know. It was a cloud of ignorance when we forced you to take the vax, and when we fired you without taking the vax. We should get amnesty. And I'm saying, no, you should get capital punishment. Yeah. I'm against capital punishment normally. But these people killed millions. So I think millions of family members should get to watch, you know.
I get it.
Absolutely. Okay.
I agree.
So that's my COVID story. The point is we were tricked. We were apple oranged by the most elementary trick ever. And here's the beauty of it is, if you tell people that you know that they apple orange the statistics, now there's no reason for mandates. They can't force you to take a mandate if you make them admit that they apple orange it's off by a factor of 100. It's 100 times less dangerous than you thought, sucker, and you want to force me to take an experimental vax. So the only way to beat the mandates is not by proving it's dangerous or not effective. It's by proving that the threat was a hoax to start.
Okay.
That's why my case, I got 75 people who filed my template asking for damages, okay? Now, the judge stayed all of them while she dismissed my case, and I'm on appeal going to the Supreme Court next.
What is that? I mean,
this is my federal court action.
For COVID?
Yeah, for asking the judge to declare any restrictions unconstitutional because it's a false alarm. Any restriction. She said, you have to have a restriction on you before I'll do that, and you don't have any. Maybe your other 75 people do, but not you, so you're dismissed. All right. So a year later, they came up with an air travel ban. I filed again. a brand new one, because now I got a restriction. And the judge dismissed that one too, threw it out, wouldn't let it get to court.
See, that's why we need to. This is why I'm excited about it. I don't want to sound like a Cal Washington cult member, but I'm really excited about.
Well, here's why they want to call me vexatious, because in 2003, I went on Parliament Hill with 7 pounds of marijuana to get busted so I could start a court fight. And my court fight forced them to drop 4,000 charges. I got the headline, 4,000 charges stayed, okay? And that was my case, did that, even if they didn't put my name. Then in 2014, one judge said, I'm canceling half of the grow permits in the country. Oh, half of the possess permits. You can have your grow permit back, but I'm canceling your possess permit because of the date of your permit. What they did was Health Canada said, we're canceling all permits on April Fool 2014. Yeah. So people who expired 3 days before then, they didn't refile. And then the judge said, okay, I'm grandfathering everybody's grow permits, but if you didn't renew your possess permit, you can't have it. And he cut out 18,000 people lost their grow permits. So I put up a template to allow people to ask for their permits back because their doctor said they needed it. And the doctor's verdict should count, not the judge's date on the permit. And 400 people filled out the template and went to court. We had a hearing in 12 federal courtrooms in 10 provinces, okay? And then eventually the judge dismissed it. He said, I didn't see enough medical evidence. The fact that your doctor saw enough and gave you a permit doesn't convince me you needed it, and dismissed them all. Then in 2017, Health Canada were stalling permits. 5 months, 6 months, 8 months, 11 months. But in 2013, it took less than a month. The director of Health Canada told the federal court in my brother's case, because they were going to let it expire. And the judge said, no. You guys explain to me by tonight. You come in tomorrow and explain why you didn't renew it on time, and you explain it tomorrow. So that night they extended his permit, okay? But still, they started the next year waiting 8 months, 11 months before they renew your permit, and you got to pay for your grow op, and you got to sit there with no pot and buy off the streets while you're waiting. So I came up with another template, filled in with another 400 people who said, we want to have our money for our rent back, and we want to have the pot we could have the value back. And for those we're still waiting, we want interim exemptions until the permit arrives. 80 people filed a motion for an interim exemption until the permit arrived, and Health Canada would hop to it, get it to them, and the court could then say, the Crown could then say to the court, they got their permits, no need to have a hearing. Hop to it motion. Hop to it permits. So 80 people got hop to it permits by asking the court for an interim permit while they were waiting for these clowns who are waiting for so long. So those were the templates that I used that got 800 people, and the Crown used that as an example of my vexatious conduct, because they were eventually dismissed by the courts, okay? So, and some judges even found that my getting so many people to come as self-represented instead of one lawyer doing a class action was vexatious, because it plugged up the courts, and I laughed about it. For $2, you could file a statement of claim in federal court, which clogged up the Crown attorney's files, clogged up the registrar, 400, 800 cases, and that would get their attention. So I was trying to get the trucker convoy, saying, instead of you guys all going and blocking the streets, why not clog the courts with a $2 statement of claim that you can't be arrested for? So I tried to get the message out, but I couldn't.
Statement of claim.
Yeah, that's what that is.
Is it like a notice of liability? Is that what it is?
It's an actual beginning of it's a statement of claim for these damages.
Interesting. So, okay, John, listen, we only got, we got 7 minutes left.
Let's go to Let's now.
Okay.
Local employment trading software. Okay. Yeah. Now, I believe there's a good chance that the nuclear war they're trying to start and destroying the fuel and the food, or to cause fuel and fuel, are to come up with a bunch of deaths to cover up for the COVID vax. Okay.
Makes sense.
Because the COVID vax is proving to be extremely deadly. Okay. And why else would they want to start a nuke war except to get rid of a lot of people who would have died from the vax if half of the planet's going to die from the vax?
Plus people aren't buying their COVID stuff anymore.
Yeah, but they already got the spike. Okay.
Well,
5 billion out of 7 got the spike, almost 8. So the point is 5 billion could start dying. And when they do, they got to come up with an excuse. Well, what better than to have them starve and freeze to death or get nuked to death? Yeah. So all of these really serious, deadly catastrophes approaching us may be to cover up what they did for COVID. But Back in the 80s, with the 22% interest rates, when I financed the first Let's software, which is still renowned as the world's first time banking software. Basically, it allows single parents to log on what nights they can double duty babysit each other's kids and then pay each other with 1 hour IOUs, even if they're broke. Okay.
Yeah, it's a great system.
Then the mechanic takes 3 hours per hour, and the dentist takes 6 hours per hour, and you have a resource network around a bunch of broke people. Yep. So if you are worried about what's going to happen when the coal doesn't get to the electrical stations and the food doesn't get to the supermarkets and the police and the firemen don't come when you call, you're going to have to start your own Let's barter network. And that means starting up your own money, your own local currency.
Right. And I just want to say, because now there's all this talk about central bank digital currencies, right? Yeah. And the World Economic Forum, the Great Reset, all that, blah, blah, blah.
Because we do Let's as well.
Well, I just want to say, it's like we're talking about solutions here. It's like we need to create the new currency system. Right. If we let those people that have screwed everything up create the next currency
and loan shark it to us,
and it's just a control mechanism. It's not there to serve us. It's certainly there to serve them.
That's right.
And serve their power and serve their money. But so we need to create the currency system, and Let's
is the ideal system.
Is I remember I used to be involved with the Toronto Let's organization, and I remember learning about Let's the first time, and I was just reading about it, and all of a sudden I got, wow, I had this epiphany. It's like, why are we? It's kind of like this. And then I wrote an article about it.
One second. My first 2-line poem. Why represent our collateral with their chips for a fee when we can represent our collateral with our chips for free?
Exactly. It's kind of like this. It's like, because we have, there's not enough money. Nobody's got enough money, right? It's like, but money, if you just think of it as a measuring tool, right? It's like, how can you run out of inches?
Good argument. Yeah,
right.
I used to, and not only that, but the fact is, I put a rubber ruler. Okay, inflation gives us a measuring unit that changes.
Right.
And there's nothing more stupid than a measurement device that changes.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Okay. All right. Okay, we got 3 minutes left. So John, you got 3 minutes to give us some solutions here.
Okay, well, everything is at my site, smartestman.ca. You can go /C19 for all of the COVID stuff. You can do /UniLet's for how to set up your own online Let's system using your Facebook account or something. So you can email people an IOU for an hour at a time instead of a paper one, okay? And my last great solution is my Gold Nugget Network. If 100 people contacted their stores and said, look, our network want to come in shop in your store, would you give us a small discount? Well, I built up a list of 200 stores in Brantford who will give my people a 10% discount, half of an entree off, the second entree off. And I could now sell these coupons for $1 a piece, because you get more than $1 for each coupon. And you can use these $1 coupons as your $1 bills in your Let's Time Bank flea markets, because the flea markets, it was a social event. People would get together once a month, bring their goodies to trade. And in Russia, when they crashed, they used to have boot flea markets. You loaded your car with stuff, you showed up one place, opened up the trunk, and then you bartered. So this is a way of doing it, giving people $1 bills, which are really $1 coupons. And anyone can set up such a system just by everybody calling the stores in their neighborhood and saying, would you give our people a deal? And I found 200 people in Brantford. In Ottawa, I had 1,000 stores on my list. So that little coupon was really worth a lot of money, and you could pick where to spend it. They all worked everywhere. So I call it magic money, because you never know what it's worth until you spend it. But it's also what you can use for your $1 bills when you have your social events in the Let's, which for poor people, going to the Let's Traders Fair was the event of the month for these people. If you're homebound and you're broke, what's the greatest event you're going to have, where other broken homebound people get out to trade stuff with you?
It's really, this goes to something that Ray was mentioning earlier. It's really about community building.
Exactly.
Right?
Yeah.
And people need community. People need to see each other face to face. Flea markets are a great place where community happens. And we're out of time, John. I'm just putting up the website smartestman.ca. Where can people get that flyer with all those coupons on?
Oh, that would be goldnuggetnetwork.com.
goldnuggetnetwork.com.
All the instructions are there. They can build their own, though. Okay.
Fantastic.
And once they build their own, they can link it to mine because we'll take their gold nuggets in our place too.
Amazing. Okay, Lamont, are you good with all this?
Man, oh man, what can you do?
So was I ambitious to have taken out the site smartestmanonearth.ca?
Well,
just because I had the same education as Mr. Spock?
Maybe you could have gone for the most interesting man as well, but then you would have had to grow a beard.
Oh, I got 10 more interesting things I could fill you in on. Okay.
Okay, well, we'll have to get you back. Okay. Thanks, everybody.
Pleasure.
Thanks, Lamont. Thanks, John. And thank you, Jennifer. And now we're going to sign off. Everybody have a great day. We'll be back tomorrow with Cal. It's going to be good. Solutions continue tomorrow at noon. Here on that channel, Care Vision.
Thanks, guys. Thank you, John. Thanks, Jen.
/EP for my videos.
Beautiful.
Thank you.